Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, special session called How the Governor Wants to Address Rising Consumer Costs like the price at the pump. Plus,
Southwest is definitely shifting into more of a post-climate change sort of world from a water perspective.
what the new state engineer is doing to make sure water access is reliable with another dry year ahead. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. We're exactly 1 week away from the first legal sales of recreational cannabis in New Mexico. Our line opinion panelists will give their thoughts on the state rollout and a concern that a rush on day one could leave patients in the state's medical cannabis program without their medicine. That's in about 25 minutes. After what was hopefully one last snow in the city of Albuquerque, the signs of spring are finally here. In the second half of the show, environment reporter Laura Pascus takes us to the Rio Grande, where a project to protect that habitat is growing stronger every day. We're learning of new accusations of sexual harassment against New Mexico State Senator Daniel Ivey Soto. More women have come forward after the initial complaint from a female lobbyist involving inappropriate sexual behavior and alcohol. I'll ask our line opinion panelists for their reaction on those accusations and the way lawmakers and lobbyists interact in Santa Fe. But first, we start with the governor's call for a special session scheduled to start April 5th. There had been speculation the governor might target crime or hydrogen, but after a last-minute deal to close the regular session and executive action last week, the governor's sights are now fixed on rising consumer costs. Will lawmakers be able to make a meaningful change? Let's get to the line. Welcome to our line opinion panel this week. Thanks for being here with us virtually. We're happy to welcome back Crystal Ciarza. She is the CEO of Ciarza Social Digital, one of the great shops here in town. Former state representative and minority whip Daniel Foley is back with us. Good to see you, Dan, as always. And we're excited to have Dave Mulryan of the group Everybody Votes back with us as well. Dave, welcome to you. Now, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham called for this special session saying she wants lawmakers to find some sort of economic relief for New Mexicans, pointing to things like inflation and high gas prices. Dave, let me start with you. Very broad question here. Got some detail to cover here. Is legislation the solution to these problems?
You know, I hope so, because I'm still reeling. Senator Katie Duhigg, which she is a representative from Albuquerque, she was down in Roswell and she put up a picture on her Facebook showing gas for $8.20 a gallon. And I was like, and of course everyone jumped on and said, oh, this can't be true. And it's like, but she's like, look, I just took the picture myself. It is true. I can assure you. I mean, this kind of inflationary, $8, it's like being a smoker. Cigarettes used to be 25 cents a pack. Now they're $13 a pack. I mean, and this, but smoking is a choice in some ways. But I mean, this idea that gas has just so dramatically, increased in price, and that oil has increased so much in price. I do think that I hope they have, Dan had mentioned, I hope they have a plan, and I hope they can execute it quickly, and that it's good for everyone.
Dan, let's go right there. Can this be executed quickly? There's some things to be discussed here. How long should this special take to get through this?
Well, I mean, as is usual, Gene, and why you're one of my closest friends out there, you love to ask these really quick questions that are super loaded. So, I mean, can it be answered? I mean, we could have an hour-long show about can the legislature solve our economic woes with a special session or passing legislation. I would say this: when the Democrats or Republicans, this is not a partisan attack on the Democrats. They are in charge in New Mexico, right? When one party is in charge of the legislature and the executive, normally when they have special sessions, everything is greased because you don't want to embarrass anybody, right? You don't want to go in and have this long drawn out fight where the opposition party is going to say, look, these knuckleheads can't even get together for a meeting, vote them out of office. So normally you come together for these times. There's long meetings leading up to this. And when they announce it, they've reached a compromise to say, here's the 5 things we're going to do. Now, I will also say it's not uncommon for them to say, here's the 5 things we're going to do and I'm not saying there's 5, Gene. I'm just hypothetically giving you that. Here's the 5 things we're going to do, and we'll spend a few hours letting the minority and the majority argue over these 2 things over here. But we will pass these 5 things, and we'll get some media time on the 2 other things. I would suspect this special session, you know, I mean, working wise will probably last a day and a half. It'll probably take them 3 or 4 days total. By the time they get up there, they form, they get their committees, they print stuff up, they come back in. I would say, you know, it's probably going to be a 3 days, you know, 3-day max session.
Okay.
Is what I would guess.
Crystal, you know, there's a feeling out there this special is about appeasing members of her own party, meaning our governor, after she vetoed that $50 million funding bill that included money for senior centers and all other things. Is that really the, you know, from the outside looking in, do you have that same sense of this?
I actually don't.
Okay.
And granted, you know, I always look at what's in the best public interest. And I think I can understand the amount of frustration, because if you actually look at the bill, SB 48, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dan Foley, you all called it like a Christmas tree bill, where it's like you hang all kinds of different, you know, capital outlay and different projects here and there, and hopefully something sticks. I would be curious if an organization like Source New Mexico, or maybe even us at New Mexico in Focus, can actually put together and see where these actual dollars are going to be spent, because they're right. There are some for senior citizen centers. There's some for like the Hobbs Senior Citizen Center, the Roswell Senior Citizen Center, Tularosa, but there's also things like senior, industrial workforce programs, the new 66 visitors, West Central 66 Visitor Center that's on here. It was almost like Santa's wish list, right? It's a wish list of items.
Is that a bad thing, Crystal?
It is and it isn't, right? And like because, for example, it's a bill that nobody can say no to. And of course, the optics of the veto looked really bad for the governor, without a doubt. But like, I'm looking at this right now, $100,000 to coordinate revisions to the Family Violence Protection Act. If you're against family violence protection, you've got to be a piece of work if you're going to be against it. So it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like, you can't veto this bill completely, but you also have, it's managing expectation and managing the needs of different communities. I find this bill very fascinating, because I'm curious to see the transparency of it all. I even know that some of the funding is going to benefit some of the nonprofits that I'm a part of, or causes that I care very deeply about. So it's kind of it's a catch-22 bill that's like, if you say no to it, you are going to make some significant detrimental problems with some of the infrastructure that some of these community services needed. But at the same time, you've also got $600,000 to start new departments that are in here, and departments that might not need to be prioritized.
I hear you loud and clear, Crystal, but timing is interesting. The governor knew all that stuff was headed her way. All right? It wasn't like they dropped this bill in her desk and she was like, oh my gosh, what is this? She could have fired a warning shot early in the proceedings and said, guys, you know, the way you're going about this is not going to work. But she didn't choose to do that. It's just, so here we are. It's all very interesting. Let me go back to the reason we're having this special, though, and that is the gas tax. And Dave, let me ask you about this. There's a possibility of one-time checks of $110 to $160 for each tax filer, or twice that for couples. There's some nuance there depending on your income, 75 grand, you know, all this. Let me ask you this. My personal opinion is whoever let this number out made a big mistake, a huge mistake. Here's why. We're the 5th largest state in the union. We already know it's killing rural parts of our state, residents trying to get to work on gas. Other states are proposing 3 to 4 times this amount in states that are vastly smaller than ours. So now we get this situation where someone's going to have to go into this special and say, guys, whoever proposed this 110 was not thinking clearly. We need a whole lot more money than this, and that's going to be a difficult conversation in my view. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, this rolling out of this number so early.
I mean, let's face it, $136 to buy gas when gas is approaching $10 a gallon isn't going to get you very far. And if we're going to go through all the rigmarole of having the special session, you know, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, literally, in New Mexico. On the one hand, the price of oil benefits the state, and the price of oil really hurts people in rural areas who have to spend so much on gas for driving. But let's put it this way. I would say go big or go home. If you're going to do it, people $1,500, give people $2,000. Wow. Make it so that they can in rural areas. And, you know, if we have the money, and it appears we do have the money, the state is in pretty good shape fiscally. I mean, the idea that it's one of those types of economic incentives that if you're a person who needs to, sort of this can complement a budget and you can spend it, it's going to be an immediate stimulus to the economy. That cannot be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, what do you make of that price? $110 for someone that's
mean,
spending $110
Gene,
a week on
Gene,
gas.
but this is the question we talk about all the time, right? I mean, we're going to be safe because they get 1 week's worth of gas. Why don't we have a special session that talks about why we're in this situation?
Thank you.
Why don't we talk about addressing the real root causes of why gas is $7 or $8 a barrel? What can we do, not only in New Mexico, but nationally to address this, right? Why don't we meet and put some pressure from our state on the feds and say, listen, we got to open up whatever the answer is. Obviously there's going to be different opinions of what that is, and I'm not trying to change the direction of the conversation, but I just think this is another example of why, I don't think the answers to our problems come out of elected officials necessarily. I think they create bigger problems, right? We got this problem, we'll throw a little money at it, we'll make you happy right now, but we'll do nothing to address the root cause of the problem. We see it with how we've dealt with mental health in this state. We see it how we deal with education. We see it we could rattle off 50 issues over the course of the time that I've been on the show, let alone since I've been in the legislature, that we have this massive issue, and the answer is throw a little bit of money at it, and we'll all kind of put some, like they said, we'll put some lipstick on the pig. At the end of the day, it's still a pig, right? I mean, we have done nothing to address the problem. The real problem is what are we going to do to address the fact that it is unbelievably expensive to travel through a state that is such a poor state, and that we expect people to get jobs in places where they choose to live, where they don't even have high-speed internet, they don't have great phone service, they don't have good roads, they don't have adequate health care. The answer can't be, hey, let's pay for gas for a week so you can drive somewhere and we'll pat ourselves on the back and all go home.
Mm-hmm. Crystal, follow up on that if you would. Is this scenario enough there's some political implications here for the governor, it seems to me. Let's say, the legislature does this thing, they have $110, the governor signs it, they make a big hoop-de-doo, and it really doesn't do much politically down the road. It would seem to me you've got to go big here, as Dave mentioned, or there's just not going to be much impact politically.
Yeah, you always, for the legislature, for those that are elected, including the governor, you actually have to think about who's being impacted the most by gas prices. And it's our native reservations and Eastern New Mexico, especially since the amount of travel that they have to do, even if they had a freaking Prius, the amount of travel that they would have to do just to simply live, right? Grocery stores are not just 5 minutes away. You don't have the convenience of places like DoorDash and Instacart. You've got to drive 45 minutes to an hour to the closest grocery store, or even 2 hours to the nearest Dillard's. And so they're going to be very, very much impacted. That their opinion, what the citizens of rural New Mexico, basically anybody outside of Albuquerque and Santa Fe, should absolutely outweigh what those in Las Cruces, Rio Rancho, Valencia County, et cetera, their opinion matters most. And so I hope that the legislators in those specific areas would actually speak up more and find out what the community really needs. Because I can't imagine that if you live in Cuba, New Mexico, where there's one little convenience store and you need the necessary goods for hospital, healthcare, doctor visits, et cetera, to be denied the ability to actually drive to Albuquerque for your doctor's appointments because you can't afford the gas is going to be really monumental. That no matter if it's an elected official that makes this change, or if it's you and me, the general public, their opinion about how much they should receive matters most above anybody else's. That's my genuine take on it.
Good final note there. That's all the time we have for that topic this week, but we'll be watching when the special starts April 5th. We'll check back in with the line panel in less than 20 minutes to talk about the lead up to the state's first legal cannabis sales.
It's my hope that these areas become a breeding ground for endangered species and other wildlife that we have here in the Bosque.
New Mexico has a new water boss under Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, State Engineer Mike Hammond. This week, environment reporter Laura Paskus talks with the longtime water manager who tells us what's coming this year in terms of water challenges and how New Mexico might be able to handle a third La Nina in a row, along with a warming climate and even more demands on the state's waters.
Mike Hammond, welcome to New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you, Laura. Very nice to see you.
So I'm just going to dive right in. Forecasts are showing that we may be looking at a third La Nina in a row. How worried should New Mexicans be about water right now?
Well, there are certain basins that are doing reasonably well near the normal snowpack environment up north. We've got the Chama Basin and the upper Colorado looking pretty good, and then as you get farther south, it starts to decline into the 80s, 70s, 60%, depending on how far south you go. But it is going to be another challenging year. There's no doubt about it. Even when we had reasonable, normal precipitation in previous years, for whatever reason, the runoff hasn't produced like it normally does. And that seems to be true also in the Colorado River Basin, where we benefit from the San Juan Chama project, and also the San Juan Basin itself has a lot of water users that rely on that supply on that side of the basin. So the Southwest is definitely shifting into more of a post-climate change sort of world from a water perspective.
Yeah, so looking at the Rio Grande specifically, El Vado is empty or empty-ish for construction reasons. We look at Elephant Butte is about 11% capacity right now. How much slack is there in the system?
When you refer to slack in terms of like meeting demands, there's likely to be some shortages. We've been experiencing shortages from in the Rio Grande project from Elephant Butte for some time, and we also had experienced some shortages from the Rio Grande Basin late in the summer last year. If it wasn't for the monsoons, farmers would have really suffered in the Middle Valley for sure. There's also been some shortages on the San Juan Chama project to the municipal and agricultural contractors from that project occurring on and off for the last 5 or 6 years. So we're certainly in they're calling it a mega drought. It's kind of hard to define that term, but it's persistent for sure. And then if you have kind of average rising temperatures, what occurs in that situation is you have more depletions associated with a degree in average temperature rise requires more expiration by plants and the environment in general, and evaporation from lakes and streams. So you're having this situation where average temperatures climbing creates more depletions. Even if you had the same water supply, you're still seeing less availability.
Right. So we've seen problems on the lower Rio Grande play out in a sort of battle between states and also the federal government that's now in U.S. Supreme Court litigation. Looking toward the middle Rio Grande, are we within our budget, within our water rights, or could we see something similar play out in the future in the middle Rio Grande?
Since the runoff of 2019, we've experienced an underdelivery to the Elephant Butte or Rio Grande project, as we call it. As a result of the index at Otoe gauge, we have to deliver a certain quantity of water. And the irony of a very high runoff is that means we have to deliver a very high amount. And that year, we underdelivered for the first time, well, on average, consistently underdelivered since 2019. So we find ourselves in a compact debit of about 120 some odd thousand acre feet, which we're taking steps to address with a following program. The legislature agreed to a drought mitigation fund that will allow us to try to catch back up and make our deliveries to Elephant Butte in order to not get into a compact violation situation at 200,000 acre feet. So that's a top priority for me and the state this year, is to try to make some progress in making not only this year's delivery, but also chip away at that debit. And meanwhile, El Vado's being reconstructed, as you mentioned. So we're very hopeful that we chip away at that debit and then get El Vado back in place. for full use, and then we'll be somewhere near where we could operate in a normal cycle, I think.
New Mexico is wrangling right now with what to do with about $4 billion in federal infrastructure money. And we had infrastructure advisor Martin Chavez on the show recently talking about some of the priorities. I'm curious, what specific projects will your office be pushing for or advocating for or launching when it comes specifically to water?
Well, there's a strong understanding that rural New Mexico has been left behind on a lot of their infrastructure needs. We're not specifically involved in community water infrastructure and wastewater. That's more of a New Mexico Environment Department group under their Construction Bureau and their state revolving fund. But there is a tremendous need for all the agencies with the State Engineer's Office, NMED, also the New Mexico Finance Authority and the Water Trust Board process to really review what we've done in the past to make sure that we prioritize allowing for those rural communities that don't have the capacity to apply for grants, to implement them, to even manage the construction. We want to figure out a way to take full advantage of this funding, both at the state and federal levels, in order for rural New Mexico to catch up and get their systems in order. And on our end, we're going to be responsible for making sure they have adequate water rights and all of that stuff for their 40-year water outlook, like all other communities that have capacity are able to do. So we want to reverse that trend.
So nationwide, when people talk about infrastructure and water, dams often come up as, there's unsafe dams nationwide. Is that really a problem here in New Mexico?
It certainly is, yeah. We have lots of public and private dams that are aged out, so to speak. Some of them are full of sediment. They have undersized spillways. We've identified those in our dam safety office, which we're regulators on dam safety aspects, and we have notified dam owners of the deficiencies that need to be corrected. But there are funds available, and we're hoping to figure out a way that a regulatory agency can help move some of these communities towards fixing their problems.
So one of the, kind of jumping back to the session, one of the things that came up during the session this year were conversations around whether the state's top water boss, whether that should have a requirement that you're a registered professional engineer.
Right. Yeah.
And I was wondering, can you explain why the state's top water official should be a registered professional engineer versus a hydrologist or an attorney?
Certainly. Well, as the history has evolved, the original territorial engineer was established pre-1907 that kind of set the priority administration rules up in this state, for good or for bad. It's you could argue that in many different directions, but that's the process that the state chose to move forward on, and they established an extensive suite of regulations and statutes, some 50 of them that I know of. Actually cite the authority of the state engineer to carry out the laws and the administration of water in New Mexico. So there could be some, to do it in a quick and I would call it unstudied manner. Would not be appropriate, because there would be a lot of possible unintended consequences. I'm not necessarily saying it shouldn't be done, but we're trying to set up a process where it could be evaluated in an open forum with people from around the state, where the governor's going to be issuing an executive order to establish a water policy and infrastructure task force. That should be announced soon, and in that vein, we'll have a group of folks that will evaluate those types of policies and make recommendations to the interim committee process and to the governor's office, and also include recommendations in the 50-year water plan that is due to be released in July. So we have a lot of work ahead of us here in the next several months, but we certainly see that as an avenue to address the organization of the State Engineer's Office, and whether some other model like what's done in other states might fit the bill better. But we do need to plan for the 21st century needs because we have 20th century sort of infrastructure and policies and laws that are guiding us into the future, and it's time to look at that.
So over the years, you and I have had a lot of conversations. You were with the Bureau of Reclamation for many years, and then the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. And I recall, like, through my reporting, you were one of the first really sort of top water officials in New Mexico to talk openly and forthrightly about climate change. And I'm curious, you know, through the course of your career in these various water management capacities, you know, what are the biggest changes that you've seen and had to grapple with as a water manager?
I think the realization, of course, of the changing water supply situation has been known to folks that pay attention to it on a routine basis. I think the public is really, you know, just now really fully understanding what we're up against, and that's been a challenge to really get folks to understand that, yes, there are hydrologic realities and there's things that we need to keep in mind as we plan various projects and various responses to Endangered Species Act and various things like that to try to keep things in balance. But to me, I think the biggest challenge has been the fact that there's a whole new suite of demands on the system. They've always been there in terms of the environment, the watershed health, and the maintenance of the flora and fauna, with just the riparian environment and all the necessary things to have a healthy ecosystem. But it's maintaining that balance in a declining, water supply situation, while keeping the traditions and the cultures of New Mexico that is just so special compared to anywhere else in the country intact because of the way we've evolved as communities, with the Acequia communities and our tribal and Pueblo cultures kind of commingling over the centuries into what we have today, which is a very modern, robust kind of socioeconomic structure that still needs to be supported with the basics like water and food security and shelter. Everybody needs that, right? So that balance with the growing demands and meeting federal laws under Endangered Species Act and making sure that we stay out of court. You spend a lot of money on litigation when you could be using it for good projects and things to help advance our water supply needs is the main challenge right now, for sure.
So kind of final words when it comes to water, what mistakes can we just not afford to make right now? Underestimating the potential for serious drought. We need to plan for that, and we need to be out ahead of it as much as we possibly can. We need to review our policies and our infrastructure procedures and operating plans to make sure that we have enough flexibility in the system to adapt quickly. Because I just got off a call on Colorado River operations. What if Lake Powell drops below the power pool? That could have a tremendous impact on the renewable energy that we're using in the Southwest, while we're simultaneously decommissioning coal-fired power plants, right? So, there could be some real serious problems if we don't plan accordingly, and that's one of the top jobs that the Interstate Stream Commission and our office is looking to implement. Well, Mike Hammond, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Laura. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
April 1st, that's the day legal recreational cannabis officially to be sold in New Mexico. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed a bill making it legal last year, as you know, but retailers haven't been able to sell legally. That ends next week. Bringing back our line opinion panelists, New Mexico is one of 18 states to legalize recreational marijuana, and now the first legal sales are almost here. We're going to get into some of the specifics of some lingering concerns, like the impact on medical supply, water rights and usage, and tax revenue. But let's start simply. Dan, let me start here. Is New Mexico ready after all this? I mean, we've been going at this in the legislature. I'll remind people one of the first ideas was to sell marijuana here in state-run shops. That died, thank God. Are we ready to do this, Daniel Foley?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether you'd say we're ready to do it or not. It's going to be done, and the reason I take that approach, Gene, is
good distinction
we haven't handled DWIs very well in the state, and we're still leading in getting that stuff with that industry. I do think that it's a unique question, right? Because at the end of the day, you got a lot of people who are for less government that are calling for more regulation, right? You've got a lot of folks who normally call for regulation who are calling for less regulation. I was watching last night, and there was an interesting scenario. So as a disclaimer too, in my private life, I actually have some clients that are in the cannabis business. We do insurance for them. It's interesting because, I think we're late to the party, right? When I was in the legislature, there was a real push with Gary Johnson saying, hey, let's be first, and we could have this tourism section, right? But now everybody around us has got it legalized, right? I mean, we're not going to have people flowing over here to do it. Now, you may see a windfall in southeastern New Mexico where folks from Texas are coming across because they don't have it in Texas legalized yet. But I'm not sure. I mean, one of the things I noticed, we hear very little. It'd be interesting to have someone do a report. We have very little. We see very little on what the number of folks that are going to be out doing the enforcement perspective, the testing perspective. I know to some instances, the Department of Ag, I think they would tell you mentally they're ready. People wise, they may not be, right? They don't have the right amount of folks out there to be doing the work that needs to be done. And so I'm fearful that this is one of those topics where we probably shouldn't get the rollout wrong, right? It's sort of like opening up a fast food restaurant. You don't want to have 2 employees open the door and have 7,000 people show up the first day, right? It's probably better at the very beginning to have more employees than you need. I'm not sure we're taking that approach in New Mexico when it comes to enforcement and testing and the regulatory side of this, helping people get the licenses through, training. I'm just not sure we've invested on the front end.
Let me kind of add to that. It's an interesting point, Dan. Kristen Thompson, we've had her here on our show. She's the director of the Cannabis Control Division for the Mexico Regulation and Licensing Department, just to let you know who she is. They're increasing their number of employees, doubling from 12 to 24. To provide better support for what you're saying, Dan. So we don't know if that 24 number is actually the right number. So this is going to be sort of feeling our way along here. And Crystal, let me get to something here. The National Nonprofit Drug Policy Alliance, that's one of the groups concerned about product availability. Worried if there's a rush on recreational businesses won't have enough to cover medical. Is that a legit concern from what you've been able to glean?
It is. I've worked in the cannabis industry before with several different dispensaries and producers, even went out to Nevada to kind of research the cannabis world, even spoke at a couple of cannabis conferences. And it is a legitimate concern just because of the supply and demand, obviously, that we'll be seeing. I think that it can actually be a great sales tactics for a producer or for a distributor is actually prioritizing the medical first. Because let's look at it this way. If you really wanted cannabis, you were able to get it with a medical card. It wasn't difficult to get a medical card here in town because it's CNPs and doctors that would write that.
Good point.
And so, yes, but it's more concerning in terms of inventory for those that actually need cannabis to just simply eat because of chemotherapy or because of seizures or epilepsy, the actual medical needs. And so the right thing for a business to do is to actually section off some of their inventory for medical patients or some to choose to stay medical, which many of the dispensaries that are currently here right now with chains like Organica, like Ultra Health, et cetera, some of those actually, this not only is this the day that they're waiting for it, they've all been waiting for recreational cannabis.
Right.
However, one of the conversations that nobody has talked about that I've had to look at from a crisis perspective is actually as we grow and as we scale, we're looking at horticulture, we're looking at agriculture, and keeping cannabis going in terms of keeping cannabis growing and growing correctly, sometimes pesticides actually come into it. And that's a conversation none of us have actually had, that if you accidentally put the wrong pesticide to help increase the amount of cannabis that you produce, or to protect the amount of cannabis that you grow from harmful bugs, or from just the crop being eaten by just the natural way of things happening, pesticides can actually be incredibly problematic for our crops here, especially with how small that we have the crop count currently in New Mexico.
Right.
That I actually foresee, yes, we've got, the social justice component of it with expungement, you've got the inventory, but pesticides is actually a topic that we haven't talked about in any of the conference conversations, and people could die if they're smoking cannabis with the wrong chemical.
It got very little play during the legislative debate. It came up maybe a couple of times. I really didn't hear much about it at all. And Dave, let me kind of extend Crystal's point here. Retailers are required to set aside 20% of their products for medical use. Crystal's making an interesting case, though, that perhaps there might be a second safety net necessary here, because 20%, should it be 20, 30%? Should it be 40%?
I think that all of these things are going to have to be decided. I will say this, prohibition was ended by Franklin Roosevelt in 1932 on the federal level, right? And we are now at 2022. We're coming up on 100 years when that's been going on. There is still a lot of change, and there's a lot of who gets to sell booze, who doesn't get to sell booze. Sometimes it's controlled state by state, or county by county, or town by town. There's going to be a lot of players that have regulatory authority here. I think New Mexico, look, it's a cash crop. I think it's good if we can grow it here. I think it's good if we can sell it here. And it's another expansion of the economy. And I think New Mexico could do, if we can get the equivalent of Hatch Green Chili in the Hatch in cannabis, I think that's going to be very good for the state, and we should work to do that.
Hey, Daniel, some environmental concerns with cannabis, no doubt, specifically water use. Water rights groups like the New Mexico Acequia Association lobbied for provisions to protect community-managed water sources. Didn't pass the regular session either. Should this have been addressed before recreational rollout?
Yeah, I think part of the problems with the cannabis from even back from when
Still with us there, Dan?
Yeah, sorry, you guys muted me. I got muted by the host. I didn't think I said something bad. I'm confused here.
I had an itchy finger. Sorry, bro.
We got Twitter over there censoring me, taking me off here. I'm getting nervous. We've got one of the things that was early on when we started talking about this, even back when I was in the legislature, was it was amazing how many people felt that there could be a potential problem, right? Whether it was acequia folks, water folks, pesticides, neighborhoods. A lot of this stuff is just going to take, like a lot of things, you're going to have to just take the first step and then make the corrections as time goes on, right? I mean, one of the things with a lot of these grows, I think one of the ideas behind limiting the size was to help curtain, the growth pattern of the product. Like lots of folks are growing it indoors, right? Lots of places are getting old warehouses and they're growing it indoors. So they're able to recycle the water and do things far different than if they went out and planted 2,000 acres out in the middle of nowhere and, were watering it through, a process that was letting the runoff go back into the ditches or back into the ground. So, but I think there's a lot of valid questions. I think a lot of people just kind of, even legislators, someone comes in, raises a point, just because you don't act on it doesn't mean you don't agree with them. Lots of times it's like, hey, there's not enough information for us to do something, but let's watch it and we'll take action when we need to.
That's not unusual. I appreciate you saying that, Dave. There's one thing about this that interests me a lot. There have been 225 licenses issued. 225 so far. And they're not going to all open on April 1st, certainly. But can we manage? I mean, Arizona opened, I think, with like 70? Massachusetts with about the same number, if not less.
Right.
Is this manageable, really? 225 licenses?
I mean, it's no, but I mean that doesn't mean they shouldn't try, and I think that's one of the things you're going to see because, also, in some ways, I mean, people talk about protected markets and people talk about whatever, but if you have 225 of these businesses opening, and it becomes clear that only 50 of them are actually going to maintain profitability, the market will shake out what's going to happen,
Right.
or they won't. And and it's just, I mean, I'm all about, like, I think we should make it accessible to everyone. Yet we've done that. I don't know what kind of, that Arizona has opened so many fewer, and there's such a larger state population wise, might give one pause, but we'll see. Look, we're 2 weeks away. We're going to find out. That's all we can say, right?
Crystal, let me ask you one quick question. I got about 30 seconds, if you could be so kind. What does this do to the black market here in New Mexico? Is there going to be a significant change in your view? I'm not asking you to be the all-seeing guru of all things marijuana across the state, but this is a debatable question, whether this is going to help on that side of things.
Well, the toxicity is actually where the black market will actually benefit from it in terms of the amount, how strong cannabis is, and what are you allowed legally to sell. So if there are people that actually want a more potent type of cannabis, they're definitely going to be looking to the black market. And that was something that was a problem with medical cannabis and still is today. So the black market will start to see an effect of this, but whether or not it's regulated correctly or not, we'll see. So
here we go. April 1st. Thank you again to our panelists. These are all topics you can hear about on the podcast, Growing Forward. Now, in collaboration with New Mexico Political Report, correspondent Megan Kamerick explores the future of the cannabis industry here in New Mexico. You can find Growing Forward anywhere you get your podcasts. Right. Now, here's environment reporter Laura Paskus.
The Rio Grande, the largest river in our state, works so hard for us. It provides water for drinking and irrigation, and it also takes our stormwater and our waste. One place you can see this dynamic at work is in Corrales. After a storm, runoff churns down the Harvey Jones Channel, and every day, 4 to 5 million gallons of treated wastewater pour from the city of Rio Rancho into the river. Now, a new project is improving that infrastructure and putting that water to better use for the environment.
This area left unmanaged had this very high bank of sediment that had accumulated in this site and was growing mostly invasive species. So it wasn't creating and maintaining valuable habitat for wildlife as it was. And so at that point, it's up to us to sort of intervene and try to recreate the processes that will allow for natural systems to function and flourish.
We've been working for a while now to eliminate flooding potential in the northern half of the village of Corrales due to the Harvey Jones Channel. And we've imposed a couple of different solutions upstream of the concrete channel and done some reconfiguration of the channel. And this particular project helps us finally evacuate all of the water out of the channel after a rainstorm. The arroyo bottoms are fantastic ways to convey stormwater into groundwater, so ways to capture that and re-inject it into the groundwater aquifer.
With the realignment of the wastewater outfall, really the benefit is that we're keeping the soil microbes alive. And that's where the magic happens with green stormwater infrastructure. That's where the healthy bacteria and fungi are able to capture and break down the pollutants that would come in the stormwater, and so that they can trap those pollutants and break them down both chemically and physically so that those pollutants aren't reaching the Rio Grande and affecting our beautiful river.
We have the intersection of all sorts of resources. In this case, we have the river, we have the Harvey Jones Channel, we have the sewer effluent line from the city of Rio Rancho, and we bring all those together into a location where we can have this type of facility or this type of restoration of wetlands and make all those resources work together. So work with your partners.
It's my hope that these areas become a breeding ground for endangered species and other wildlife that we have here in the Bosque. I know that there are silvery minnow that were found just downstream of where we're standing. And so hopefully this area will become a backwater habitat and potentially breeding habitat for that species. as well as tons of other birds and wildlife. There's lots of opportunity to replicate this project up and down the Rio Grande, particularly in places where you have outfall of a permanent water supply that will help maintain the vegetation and the healthy soils that are needed for the natural filtering that happens in wetlands.
Welcome back to our Line Opinion panelists for one final discussion this week. A scandal in Santa Fe is growing fast. This week we learned about new accusations of sexual harassment and bullying involving State Senator Daniel Ivey Soto. Common Cause New Mexico and other groups issued a second open letter to state senators detailing more complaints of alleged harassment, gender-based bullying, and inappropriate advances. That's after their first letter last month, where one female lobbyist laid out specific accusations of inappropriate touching, harassment, and bullying. It's worth pointing out that we are taping this on Thursday, and as of this moment, Senator Ivey Soto remains a senator. Now, given these new accusations, Daniel, as an ex-senator yourself, should he step down?
First of all, Gene, I was from the smarter side of the house. I was a representative, so that's where.
Sorry about that. You were a house man.
That's where the brains and the greater basketball record resided when I was in the legislature. I just want to go on record with that. You know, at some point, you know, I mean, that's always an individual question, right? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the party is telling him, to find out what the leadership is telling him. It seems to me that Senator Ivey Soto is reaching an untenable position right now, right? That there's just, you know, it's just going to be very difficult for him to, you know, be able to navigate. You know, back in the days, you could get away with these types of things, accusations, because it was a small bubble up there, right? You know, you had a few media guys, you had a couple statewide newspapers. If you were able to get your local hometown reporter to understand you're not a bad guy, you could survive. But now with social media and the things like this, it's just way too much. And when I say survive, I don't mean from a scandal of, you know, harassing people. I'm just saying, you think about the amount of people that got DUIs or had issues up there that it never affected them later on. Today, I just think he's in a place now where, you know, I don't think that he's got anybody advocating on his behalf on the legislative side. And that's going to be difficult when they go into the committee to say, listen, we're going to make a change. The other thing that makes it difficult is that people aren't thinking about, regardless of the people involved. Again, I feel for everybody that's involved in this situation, the victims, the people that are the accusers, Senator Ivey Soto as well. I mean, everybody has to be thought of. But at the end of the day, you have to also say it's a pretty safe Democrat district, I believe, that he's a senator in. And so, you know he's going to get primaried, and you're just not sure that the leadership of the party is going to say, we want to spend a bunch of money protecting you or knocking you out. So this is the opportunity to do it. I think you'd see leadership dig their heels in if it was more of a swing seat, right, on either side, saying, hey, we don't want to lose that vote. But when things like this happen and you're from a very safe seat for that party, it's really easy for the party to say it's time to make a change.
Interesting point there. Crystal, the Senate is, sorry, Dan, you're a former House Minority Whip. Didn't mean to put you on the Senate side there. But Crystal, the Senate is conducting a formal investigation into the complaints. But beyond that, we don't have many details because according to policy at the Roundhouse, investigations into harassment complaints are confidential. Doesn't it seem logical that the State Ethics Commission should handle cases like this?
Absolutely, in terms of the potential part of it, but you have to think of, coming from the lens of transparency. And I hope, Senator Dee Dee Feldman would be proud of me to say this. It's like you have to protect. There's a time for transparency and there's a time to protect the victims or those that have been affected by this. And so I understand that the Ethics Commission should really evaluate the scenario, the situation, but from a higher level perspective, not necessarily the details of the accusations, because you don't want to start re-triggering anybody that had dealt with the sexual harassment, the uncomfortable situations, et cetera. I'm sorry. I have to go back to, Dan, I appreciate what you're saying, and especially because of your insight. You're way smarter than me, and I'll probably be the only person saying this. You're way smarter than me when it comes to the politics of politics, right? But when it comes to sexual harassment and gender-based accusation, or negatively gender-based accusations, at the end of the day, those come first. The victims, those that have been harassed, have to come first in a situation, especially since Emerge New Mexico is involved now, and Common Cause, among other nonprofits that are very closely aligned. Yes, if he decides not to resign, that's his prerogative. But without a doubt, he's going to be negatively impacted on the next election that he has.
Crystal, if he doesn't resign, should the Senate move to expel him?
I will let him, Senator Ivy Soto, dig his own grave. And that's what I'm going to say about that. Because if you look at his interviews and the way that he's handling the situation, and, I applaud, as a public relations professional, I applaud the fact that he said that he's a no comment kind of guy. But I have a tendency, just like him, when you open your mouth and you don't know what's going to come out of it, he is making things worse for himself. So if he doesn't resign, he's just going to keep digging that hole. Yeah. End of discussion.
Gene, I got to ask Crystal,
Please.
did you think that I said that we shouldn't be supporting the victims?
No. That's not what I said. What I mean is, I understand the politics of it, and I appreciate, you having that insight, but I don't think he's going to continue in his seat because the victims' voices are going to be louder than the political voices.
I got you. Okay, I just want to make sure. I mean, I'm not advocating or saying you should get away with this, and I'm not. I feel for all the victims that have come forward. I just think that lots of times, I was just trying to give an inside perspective of the politics, knowing that that's something that we were talking about. But it's
an interesting point there. Dave, let me swing you in here. The executive director of previously mentioned Common Cause New Mexico. I love this point. She says there is a broader toxic culture at the Roundhouse when it comes to lawmaker interactions with lobbyists. That includes drinking and the important part to me, an expectation of some level of harassment or bullying. Now, I think that's really getting down to the nut of it to me, that we've got this system now where people are like, you know what, this is the way it goes down. You should expect a hard time here. That's got to go somehow. I'm interested in your take on that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of this is generational. I think that, Daniel Ivy Soto, he's a little bit younger than I am. And, but I think that if you spend any time speaking to millennials, like, they are so in tune with what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. That doesn't make any excuses for what's happened here. And if there is, a culture in the legislature and in the Roundhouse and the body politic in Santa Fe that needs to be changed. Listen, the best thing you can do is use your vote, get younger people, get more women in there, and that's going to solve it as much as anything.
Daniel,
and I want to comment on that toxic culture too,
Please.
really quickly.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's I don't know enough, but I think one of the things that always, when I first started going around the Roundhouse and as a communications professional, just simply complimenting the work, it's all a game. It's all a show to actually see and connect and get to know people and relationship building and all of these different things. So I definitely understand where Heather is coming from, the executive director of Common Cause New Mexico. But again, what Dave said, it is a little bit of the old school way of thought, but it goes back to the conversation we were all having very candidly. How do you modernize the legislature so you're not just whining and dining all the time? You're actually making effective work, including on the downtime. And it's not just always about partying. And everybody loves a good party. I know I do, but it is a very different culture whenever you're lobbying, and I respect that to come to light instead of behind the scenes.
Daniel, what do you make of the idea? It's been reported that Mr. Ivy Soto was cracking open bottles of wine and killing bottles of wine with the lobbyist in his office. And I don't want to get into what's very common. Is that not a sign that we need to be more professional here? I mean, there's a lot of folks that would look at that from the outside looking in and saying, you know what, that's your problem right there. You got people who feel like it's okay to just get drunk in the middle of the day, and then things happen, of course, as we know, when there's alcohol involved. You're a former legislator. Should all these things be banned officially?
I mean, I don't know how you're going to ban all these things, right? I mean, the answer isn't banning all this stuff. I mean, the answer is better choices, right? Know who you're electing that's going to make better choices.
Right.
I mean,
character, 100%.
I remember a good friend of mine once told me when I first got elected, and I tried to live by this up there. Not that I was any magnet for attracting people that want to come spend time alone with me. I mean, I was sort of ostracized, but I tried to live my legislative career by the Billy Graham rule, right? And Billy Graham used to say, people used to ask Billy Graham all the time, how have you maintained all a scandal-free life? And back in the 80s when all these scandals were coming up, and he said, I've got the Billy Graham rule. I'm never alone in a room with the door closed with a single woman unless it's my wife. And, I made a point when I was in the legislature that, if anybody came to see me, I tried man, woman, constituent, not constituent. I always had a staffer in there with me, for the length of that conversation. And, it was rare that you would shut the door. Now, obviously, if a friend comes in.
But what about the legislators who are not as conscientious, Dan? I love the story, but what do we do about the people who want to get loaded in the middle of the day?
What do you want to do? They're running for office. I mean, at some point we have to realize elections have consequences, right? I mean, I'm having this conversation now with friends of mine about.
Are we supposed to know this about these personalities when they're running for office?
You should get to know it. How do you not know it? I mean, you're out with people. There's plenty of indicators. There's plenty of ways to get to know people. Look, you can look at who's supporting them, where they worked, who they're running with, what their platforms are. And I'm not saying you should know this the first time, Gene. There's going to be an opportunity coming up here shortly. I'm not picking on Senator Ivy Soto. There's going to be a situation coming up here shortly where he may say, I'm not getting out. Right. And you know what? We'll know loud and clear what his constituents think, right? I mean, we knew when I was in the legislature, there were people who got in trouble for things, and they got reelected. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's our job to try to put a bubble around everybody and say we have to have rules to protect people. People have got to be smart enough to know who they're voting for, what they're getting in their legislator, and making honest, conscientious decisions about that.
Thanks again to our line panel as always this week. All right, be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics the line covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. Did you happen to catch that fascinating story by Dan Boyd in the Journal this past weekend on the bizarro world situation of how much money is coming into state coffers right now because of high gas prices? It's a great read and an instructive one, as it puts in relief our relationship with global pricing and our local fortunes. Now, what's happening is simple. Every dollar increase in the average price of oil means an additional $30 million for the state of New Mexico. And the money is pouring in. In fact, it's coming into the new Early Childhood Trust Fund so quickly, it could be worth $2.5 billion by midsummer and $4 billion by next year. All this while lawmakers try and figure out a way to give you a break at the pump. Now, that baby budget bill is one thing. Legislators watching new money pile up is another thing altogether. As a certain television frog we are kind of fond of around here once said, it isn't easy being green. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.